Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where Karens think that they rule the world and that nobody else matters. And in this episode, a Karen becomes the manager of a small business. And guys, let me tell you, it just gets worse and worse from there. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I live in a small complex with a communal parking lot. No reserved spaces. On my wife's birthday, she invited a friend over to go out celebrating. When her friend showed up, there happened to be a tree that had fallen in the parking lot and blocked half of it off while it was being cleared. The only spot she could get to was one of the 2 disabled spots in the lot. Now that wasn't a problem since she had a valid handicap tag which was displayed. She asked when she came in if it was okay for her to park there, and I said it was fine since legally she was allowed to, and the only person in the complex to use the spot could park in the next spot. So we got ready to go out, and when I went to get my car, I noticed that the car that's usually parked in the disabled spots had parked directly behind our friend, blocking her in and left the other disabled spot empty. I told the apartment manager to please have her move her car by morning. So we went out for a nice night of clubbing and we got home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the car was still blocked in, and the other disabled spot was still empty. So I called the police. They show up, look at the way she was parked, and they start laughing and said, "Why didn't she park in the next spot?" I told them I didn't know, and that's when the officers at 3:30 in the morning did that cop knock on her door to wake her up and told her to move her car. And that's when she began yelling at him, "That's my spot, and I'm teaching someone a lesson." The officer then explained to her that that's not her personal spot and there was another one right next to it, even closer to her door. He then told her to move the car immediately and to think about what she's gonna say next because she was very close to going to jail. So she moved the car and she never spoke to me again. But here's the thing. She also yelled at the apartment manager when he asked her to move it, and it turns out that she was behind in her rent, so they started eviction proceedings. The manager then paid me $150 to take her boxed up stuff and throw it in the building's dirty basement. Listen guys, I just want to say that if you're already late on your rent and not in good standing with the apartment manager, it's probably a bad idea to draw more attention to yourself by doing something like this. And I love how the Karen's first response was, "But I'm teaching someone a lesson." Silly Karen, little did she know that the person she was teaching a lesson to was herself. So I'm a longtime lurker and listener, and I'm very proud to say that I encountered my very first entitled Karen. So this happened about a week ago when I was asked to fill in for a friend at a ski center. Now, the layout of the area is somewhat important to the story, so allow me to give you a short tour. There are 5 ski lifts from left to right. There's the family lift, the kiddie lift, 2 anchor lifts beside each other, and the last one that leads to the street, which is for rails and jumps, and none of them are gondola lifts. I was working at the so-called family lift, which is meant for families with little kids. This means that the slope is small compared to the rest, so everyone in the family can ride together. Next to the lift I was working was a sledding slope, which is for people who just want to come sledding. This is free, meaning you don't need a ski pass to enter. Also, every lift has a snowmobile, and I had mine parked right next to the lift so I can have somewhere to sit if I wanted to, and due to the cold, the suspension was somewhat frozen, which meant that when someone took a seat on the snowmobile, it made a sound. Now with that, on to the story. We have the entitled Karen, her kids, and me being me. I was helping a young girl onto the lift as she was having problems, and when I had my back turned while helping the girl, I heard the suspension creak. And my first thought was, oh, that's my turn to go get lunch. I thought it was my coworker, but nope. I turn around to see 2 of Karen's hellspawn trying to start the snowmobile. At that I say to them, "Hey, what on earth do you think you're doing?" Kid number 1 says, "We want to drive the snowmobile. Mom says we can." Kid number 2 says, "Yeah, we're gonna drive it up the slope." I tell them, no, you can't do that. First of all, you're definitely not old enough, as you have to be 16 to drive one, and you can't drive this unless you work here. Kid number 2 says, "But Mom said we could." I tell him, I don't care what your mom says, you're not allowed on it and I need you to leave. Now at this point, guess who cuts me off? The mom comes and says, "Hey, why are you screaming at my kids?" I ask her, "Ma'am, are they your kids?" Karen says, "Yes." "Now tell me why you're screaming at them." I say to her, "They're on the snowmobile and they're trying to start it and take it for a joyride." Karen says, "So?" I told them they could. I tell her, "Ma'am, they can't do that. They're not old enough, they don't work here, and they haven't even been trained on how to operate it. Plus, they're like 5 years old." It was at that point Karen says, "Just teach them how to use it right now." To which I say, "I can't, miss. Unless you work here, you're not allowed to drive it in the area." Kid number 1 then says, "Mom, I want to drive. Tell him." Karen says to me, "Just start the snowmobile and let them ride." Now at this point, one of our regulars and a former coworker comes to the lift and gave me a look asking, "Hey, do you need help, son?" To which I say, "Oh, hi Mike, tell the boss I said hello." Now I want to say that it does sound cheesy to say that we use the code, but we've been told that if we're in a situation where we need the owner and we don't want to say it out loud for one reason or another, to tell the other employee, "Tell the boss I said hello," and the boss would come down as soon as possible. Anyway, he understood, and he went up the lift and down the slope towards the office. Now, during that 10-second window, the Karen had climbed the fence and she had joined her kids at the snowmobile to get it started. And then something struck me, and I don't know why I didn't notice it before, but none of them was in ski gear. They had no helmets, no ski boots, no skis, or anything. And the Karen had left 2 sleds behind the fence. At this point, I'm trying to stay somehow polite and say, "Ma'am, why aren't any of you in ski gear?" Karen says, "Because we just decided to go sledding." I tell her, you can't be on the side of the gates if you're not planning to ski." Karen says, "Yes, we can. We're paying customers. We ate inside that restaurant." To which I say, "It doesn't matter. You can't be here unless you're going to ski." Karen then says, "Shut up. We're paying customers, and that means that we have the right to be here and the right to ride this snowmobile." At this point, I've really lost it. So I decide to use my army voice and say, "Okay, that's it. Get off the snowmobile right now." The woman is still shocked and says, "How dare you talk to me like that? You need to show me some..." I then cut her off and say, "I've tried to be polite. I've tried to tell you kindly to leave the snowmobile alone, and yet you've refused. Do you realize that your kids can get injured or even worse, kill or injure someone else if they drove this? You and your kids need to leave as you clearly can't be here." Karen then tries to play the victim card when a family of 6 came up the lift. She starts screaming, "Help! This boy is harassing me and my babies." Now, lucky for me, the family didn't believe her when I explained the situation, and I assured them that she didn't need help. And this is where Karen decides that she would play the infamous "I know the owner" card. With a smug look on her face, she says, "You know what? I know the owner, so unless you want to lose your job, I suggest you start that snowmobile." I reply, "Oh, so you know the owner?" Karen says, "Yes. I can see the owner walking towards us as the regular had sent him." I then say to Karen, "Well, here's your chance to explain to him why I should get fired." I could see that Karen start to worry a little, but she quickly shook it off. The owner asked, "So what's the problem here?" Karen flies into a rant saying, "Your employee has been so rude towards me and my kids and refused to let us ride that snowmobile, even though I know we're allowed to do so as paying customers." The owner says, No, you're not allowed to do that. Who told you that? Also, I can see that none of you are dressed to be on the side of the fence, and thus I can assume that you have not paid to be here." Karen starts pointing at me and says, "Well, what about him? He's not dressed for skiing either." The owner tells her, "Well, that's because he works here and he should not be dressed for skiing." At this point, Karen slowly realizes that she's fighting a losing battle and decides to go for the harassment claim. She starts screaming, "Well, he harassed me and my babies, and I demand he's fired for this behavior." A little bit about the owner is he's a chill guy and he has a great sense of humor and doesn't take crap from anybody. He saw that he had this amazing chance to strike down Karen, and he says, "Well then, should we see what the audio cameras have recorded?" At that, Karen says, No, that's not necessary, but I demand he be fired for his..." At that point, the owner cuts her off and says, "And I guess I should also tell my daughter that her boyfriend's a horrible person for harassing a mom and her children, right? Oh, how devastated she'll be." He said that sarcastically. You see, what the Karen did not know is I've been dating the owner's daughter for 2 years now. She then realizes that her battle was lost, and just on cue, she starts shrieking about how she'll leave awful Facebook reviews, police will hear about this, and how she'll never come back because we're so horrible to customers, yada yada yada. After she left, me and the owner start laughing, and he said he would save that security footage because he wanted to keep this as a Karen takedown trophy. I do hope I get to see her again, so I can ask her if she would like to see the owner again. Well guys, talk about getting embarrassed after pulling that little stunt, right? And guys, I've always said over and over and over again, before you use the mighty I know the owner card, make sure you actually know the owner, because it's gonna backfire really fast. So many years ago, I worked at a once busy salon where we did fake nails, waxing, and mani-pedis. Within a week of opening, we were booked solid. It was a small town, where we were the only business that offered these services. The owner hired all of the staff, including an amazing assistant manager and an absolute cow as the manager. Now, I never liked the woman, but she was recommended as she was strict, and she knew her way around the accounting systems. The company policy was no kids allowed in the store, under the age of 12. This was so people in there can enjoy a relaxing time without screaming kids. The other major rule was a federal law: no smoking in a place of business. There was an area outside the back of the store where staff could go smoke if they wanted to. Within a month of the store opening, the manager starts to let people in with babies and toddlers. Now I'm thinking, that's not good, but it wasn't too often. Maybe twice a week to begin with. The assistant manager, let's call him Michael, wasn't too happy about that, but he had no say in it. The manager, Karen, then starts to smoke in the manager's office, originally with the door shut, but as soon as she opened the door to the windowless room, the waft of cigarettes came out and stunk up the store. I'm a smoker myself, and even I thought this was bad. After a while, Karen didn't even bother shutting the door anymore. Michael had finally had enough. He lost his cool and he yelled at her, telling her that he was not going to be responsible for her negligence and her breaking federal laws. Michael ended up quitting, and we had lost so many of the new clients that we were down to almost no bookings a day. Any walk-ins and booked clients often turned and left because of the smell. Fast forward 2 more months, and the accountant to the business had some concerns about the business activity. He tried to call, but was told that Karen was always busy. So after a week, he calls the owner and explained that something wasn't right. So the owner drives to town, and she lived 4 hours away. When she got there, the first thing that hit her was the stench of the cigarettes, as that came through the door. The second thing was the snotty 15-year-old girl that Karen hired, who happened to be her granddaughter, sitting at the reception desk on her phone, texting. She didn't even look up to see who came in or to acknowledge the owner. The third thing was that there was 2 women in the store. One was sitting at the nail station, not getting her nails done, but talking, and the other woman having a pedicure done by the new assistant manager, who happened to be Karen's niece, a mini Karen. Between them on the floor was 2 crawling babies and 2 toddlers, all screaming and playing about like it was a daycare, and the owner was livid. I then witnessed the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. The owner walks right past the kids on the floor, straight to the manager's office, and she stood there stunned. There was Karen, on the computer playing solitaire and smoking a cigarette. The owner then said, "Ahem, you do know that smoking in a place of business is illegal, right?" At that, Karen didn't even look up. She just said, "I own the store, so my rules. Piss off." The owner tells her, "No, I suggest you put the cigarette out, pack up your stuff, and get the F out of my store." With that, Karen finally looks up and her face went pale. She quickly butt out the smoke and she started to apologize, and the owner wasn't having any of it. The owner kept screaming out, and with that, Karen leaves quickly and quietly. At that moment, the waxing room door opens and Mary the wax lady just stood there grinning. She knew stuff was going down. The client she had was standing right next to her, and that's when Mary turns to her and says, "I'm sure the next time you come here there won't be any smell." The owner then said, "Ma'am, I'm very sorry for this. Please have today's session on the house." With that, Mini Karen stands up and gets in the owner's face saying, "Who the hell do you think you are?" The owner tells her, "I'm the owner of this place, and this," pointing at the kids, "is a gross breach of company rules." Mini Karen scoffs and says, "No, my aunt is the owner." At that, the owner smiles and says, "That woman I just fired for breaking federal laws, smoking in the office, yeah, she's gone. And as of today, you're not welcome here anymore." Now, Mini Karen wasn't moving, and that's when the owner turns back to her and says, "Is there a problem? Do I need to call the police?" It was at that point she admits defeat and turned, got her things from the store, and left. That's the moment where the snotty girl at the front counter, who seemed completely oblivious to what was happening, lights up a smoke. The owner marches over to her and says, "Hey, you're not allowed to smoke indoors, and by the looks of you, you're probably not allowed to smoke by law." That's when she says, "My grandma owns the store, so I can do whatever." The owner was thrown by this, but she stood her ground and told her of her status and the employment status of her grandma and aunt. She also told her that grandma could be fined thousands of dollars for providing cigarettes to a minor. The owner then fired her. And then she looks up angry and says, "You can't do that because I actually don't work here." The owner smiled and said, "Then get out of my store." So within a week or so of reopening, we were back up to being fully booked a week in advance. Michael was back and he became the manager, and he's the best manager I've had to this day. Mary became the assistant manager, and locks were changed, security passcodes were changed, and there were smiles all around. Yeah, leave it up to a Karen to become big boss and destroying a business, guys. That's definitely what happens when you give lazy people positions of power. Like, how long did she think she was gonna keep this cushy job up when no money was coming in, and all she did was sit in her office smoking and playing solitaire? Think Karen. So here's some context. Since last year, I've been sick. Now at first, I thought we'd need surgery. However, the doctor wanted to check something out first and sent me to another doctor. After a couple of months of testing, this was the last one needed. I had also messed up my leg during this time, and it made it extremely hard to walk on my own. My doctor suggested that I buy a cane, which I did. Now another thing about me is, while I'm an adult, I have an extreme baby face. My height of 5 feet doesn't help with that either. Now done with the context, let's get to the story. I'm sitting in the doctor's office waiting for me to get called back. The doctor's office was absolutely packed, so it took a while for me to get called back. After 5 minutes of waiting, a 7-year-old boy and a mom walks in and they check in. Both sit down in front of me and I don't really think anything of it. I move my cane more towards me in order to avoid tripping them, and I look at the TV as I wait. So after a couple of minutes, I hear a small voice speak saying, "Excuse me." I look down from the TV and I see this little boy across from me looking at me. I say to him, "Yes, can I help you?" The boy asked me, "How come you have a cane?" The mother looks up from her phone and looks at me and then him, and she says, "Don't ask people those questions." I tell her, "Oh, that's okay. I don't mind people asking. I had an injury and the cane helps me walk." The boy asked, "Does it hurt when you walk?" I tell him sometimes, but the cane does help. Now I know kids tend to be naturally curious, so I didn't take his commenting as rude. After he asked, we start talking about our days, how they were going, and eventually got to talking about birds. Now the kid was an absolute encyclopedia about birds, and he told me a lot of facts about birds. He then notices my necklace, which is a metal raven, and says, "Wow, I like your necklace. Is that a raven or a crow skull?" I tell him it's a raven skull. You know a lot about birds. That's really awesome. The kid gets really excited and says, "Yeah, I really like..." At this point, his mom cuts into our talking and says, "Excuse me?" I look at her, and she had this look of pure hatred and disgust. I ask her, "Yes, is there something wrong?" The woman says, "Why are you wearing a skull around your neck? That's kind of inappropriate, don't you think?" I say to her, "No, it's just a metal raven skull, nothing inappropriate about it." Karen then says to me, "Well, it's kind of satanic, isn't it?" Her saying that blew me out of the water. In what world is wearing something like a metal bird skull satanic? I say to her, "Ma'am, it's just a necklace. It's nice, I liked it, so I bought it." She then pulls me to the side and says, "You really need to take it off. You're gonna corrupt my son. We're Christian." I then look over to her son, and he looked as dumbfounded as I was. And she says, "You need to take that off right now and give it to me. Also, you look really young to be using a cane. You just want attention." At this point, I'm done taking her BS, and I say, "Ma'am, I'm not giving you my necklace or my cane. And if anything, you're the one wanting attention, and you're being ignorant for thinking that just because my necklace has a bird skull on it, it's satanic. Also for thinking young people can't have a cane just because they're young. Young people use things such as canes and walkers all the time." Karen then screeches at me, "How dare you talk back to me?" At this point, she gets up and she tries to grab my cane and the necklace, and I was ready to push her back. But the security guard who was coming inside for some water, he steps between the mom and me. The security guard says, "Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to sit back down and leave this person alone." Karen says, "What? I'm trying to free her from Satan." The security guard says, "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave now. This behavior isn't tolerated here." Karen then says, "But my son has an appointment. I can't leave him here." The security guard asked, "Can you call his father? If not, you're gonna have to reschedule." The boy tells him that his dad's in the car. At this point, security guard escorts mom out of the building, and that's when dad comes in to watch his son. The dad then apologizes profusely for his wife's behavior, and stated that she's a little eccentric. After 10 more minutes, I was called back and said goodbye to the boy. After my appointment, him and his dad were gone, so I went on my way. Something that I think is funny, however, is what the dad said regarding his wife. He said to me, "I don't even know why she said it was satanic. She's not even Christian. She's an atheist." Yeah, that's the end of the post, but guys, she sounded totally nutso, right? And I'm willing to bet that satanic thing was just to get OP to give up their necklace so she could give it to her son because, you know, some people are like that. Some people make up any excuse to take things from others. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our slash entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I hope you didn't shake your heads too hard. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy Karen stories. And if you guys missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady, where a super psycho Karen attacks OP for not serving her and OP destroys her. Guys, it's such a crazy story. So go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.